I knew you'd be back today because the first several parts of this program are just incredible. Major topics that are dominating the news, and we find how they're riveted and part of God's plan for the future. I've often wondered, how will the Antichrist be introduced? We're beginning to see how. All these boards that are taking place, it's amazing. They call it the king without kingdoms. They call it the idea of AI having power over every written word, including the Bible, including the Quran, including the Judaism text. My friend, these things are lies from the pit of hell. They compare it to Genesis. Yeah, all these things are taking place in the news, but they fit perfectly with God's word. You see, it's not a Genesis like the book of Genesis. It's a false Genesis. It's an anti-Genesis, but yet they play on the word of God. You're going to learn about that today and many other things. Thank you for joining me. God bless you as we continue our series on this important topic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Bill Koenig's done some good work there too. But who knew that ICE would steal the headlines from, well, ICE? Yeah, I mean, going back to what Brandon said, he is spot on about Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Both of those guys are New York-based investors who never met a two-state solution they didn't like. I mean, this is what it's been all about from the beginning, a two-state solution. It's one of the reasons that I couldn't support Trump for the second term. Obviously, I didn't support Kamala Harris, but to me, this is a big deal for all the reasons you just reiterated, Brandon. God, it is God's land. He will not share it with another. Israel has the right to the land, going back to the unconditional covenant in Genesis 12. And so any I don't care how many technocratic, brilliant guys that you get together in some think tank and call it a board of peace, any solution that involves giving away God's holy land is doomed before it ever starts. I mean, that God's not going to allow it. Ultimately, it's God's land. Now, we know that the King of Kings and Prince of Peace is going to come back someday, and then he will rule over this kingdom of peace, and Israel will finally inhabit the full boundaries of the land as outlined in Genesis 15, like you referenced, Brandon. But until then, we're just kidding ourselves and spending a lot of money, $1 billion to become a permanent member of this board of peace. I mean, talk about a terrible investment. That's fool's money. That's a fool's errand to think that you can throw money at a problem that involves, let's give part of God's land to the enemy. And it just doesn't make sense. So I couldn't agree more that this plan is paving the way for the ultimate enemy, the ultimate member of that unholy trinity, Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And by the way, in my book on the false prophet, Spirit of the False Prophet, Rise of the Global Technocracy, I have a whole chapter on Jared Kushner. It's interesting that two Jewish younger men are kind of in the limelight right now. Obviously, Harari is all homosexual and an atheistic guy, but he, to me, I have a whole chapter on him as a very intriguing candidate for that second in command. The 2IC, the false prophet.
False prophet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The text says in Revelation that the Antichrist comes out of the sea, which tends to be a representation of the Gentile nations, while the false prophet comes out of the land, I think being Israel. So I think the false prophet is Jewish, the Antichrist is a Gentile. I want to get to the Genesis thing and Kissinger and how it all ties in with Donald Trump. But Leo, I know you wanted to jump in a while ago. Go ahead.
Well, I was listening intently when Dr. Lindsted and some of the others were speaking, and some things just popped into my mind that I think I want to talk about. He said that it needs to be a Jewish person who builds the temple. And, it could be a Cyrus type individual who gets the ball rolling and lays the foundation for it. I thought that was very interesting. In light of that, what popped into my mind was Mark Levin was at an American Jewish event a couple weeks ago, and he approached President Trump at the podium, put his arms around him, hugged him, and said, "This is the first Jewish president." That was very symbolic. There are people in Israel who consider President Trump, for all intents and purposes, Jewish because he's, taken their side in so many things, at least on the surface, like we've been talking about. And Dr. Lindsted also talked about how, and I think he's right, everybody on the board currently comes from a political or economic or technocratic type background, and we're missing the ingredient of a religious person. Now, he did invite the Pope, and we're waiting to see what happens with that. But let's not forget that President Trump himself is the guy who said very recently that the only thing that stops him from doing anything is his own mind and his own morality, meaning he doesn't answer to any religious authority. He doesn't answer to God. He doesn't answer to the U.S. Constitution. There is nothing creating boundaries around the man in his perception other than what's in his own mind. And what does the Bible say about the Antichrist? In, I think it's Daniel chapter 10. This popped into my mind when Brandon was speaking about Jared Kushner and Witkoff. They're basically New York real estate agents. They never saw a two-state solution that they didn't like, according to JB, and I agree with that. But they also never saw a money-making opportunity that they weren't ready to pounce on. At the same time, they're representing the United States, and that's squishy. They really don't represent the United States because they don't have any formal government title. They're representing the Trump business interests. And Jared Kushner has real estate deals in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, in Eastern Europe. He's doing hotel deals. He can't wait to get his hands on some of the Ukrainian land. And then you look in Daniel chapter 10, and it says the Antichrist will destroy many through prosperity and the craft of his hand. I see a lot of prosperity going around here. Again, I'm not trying to pin the Antichrist label on any one particular man, but I'm seeing a system here that seems focused not on Israelis or Palestinians. I'm seeing a whole strategy that seems to be focused on redeveloping the land. Talk about dividing God's land. In some ways, this is worse because it's taking a share of God's land and trying to convert it to your own profit-making enterprise. And in some ways, it's almost like, Judas selling out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So I think there's a lot that meets the eye here. The comments of this panel have really got me thinking. And I would just encourage people to keep an open mind on everything you see going on. And some of our preconceived notions may be seriously challenged in the weeks and months and years ahead.
Remember how we were during George W. Bush administration, right? And then a lot of Americans look back and were like, ugh, how did I get taken in? How did I get taken in with all that, right? I mean, we were right out of the gate criticizing with a guest, Kirby Anderson, the Patriot Act. Because we said, look, this is not good. This is why. And we were getting people emailing us and saying, are you guys communists? And I'm like, no, we just realize how this is going to work out if we let government have this kind of power. And I'm afraid that's where we're going to get. We're going to look back and a lot of people are going to go, how did I get taken in again? But that's deception. The problem with deception is people don't know they're being deceived or set up or conditioned. Patrick, I want to go to this here. Dr. Lindsted, I know, is going to say something about it as well. Here's the book by Henry Kissinger. It came out after he died. Artificial Intelligence, Hope, and the Human Spirit. Genesis. Henry Kissinger, writing it with Eric Schmidt. I'm guessing that's the Eric Schmidt behind Google. Is that right, Patrick? Oh, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Yes.
It is here, okay? And then I want to show you this picture. Here's Donald Trump and Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
And then here is the presidential action, November 24th, 2025, launching the Genesis mission. What is the Genesis mission, Patrick?
Basically, it's starting over. It seems like it's like the sparking of everything that happened at the Tower of Babel. Eric Schmidt has received the baton from Henry Kissinger. By the way, both are members of the Trilateral Commission. Henry Kissinger was a founding member, but he made sure he wrote 2 books with Eric Schmidt. This is the last one, came after he died. It speaks of new beginnings, and what we see is the creation of this global state is forming. It's not formed completely. When you talk about, for instance, globalization, you can't encompass the whole world in that statement. For instance, China's not on board necessarily with us, and Russia is not on board with us. And we can see about the economic situation in the world with technocracy, the accumulation of resources, et cetera. That's iffy as well. And to Rob's point, there needs to be a global religion at some point. I think we're going to see this probably very clearly with AI at some point, but there has to be a global effort on all these 4 fronts to combine the political, the economic, and the religious side. That would be the three-legged stool, if you will, that the end times will rest on. That'll be the system that the Antichrist takes over for sure.
And the Genesis program, help me out here. Does it have something to do with DNA and biotech, personalized vaccines?
Oh yeah, exactly. This is the expression of technocracy and transhumanism is all over this document completely.
Dr. Lindsted, what have you found out about it, studying it?
They invited the comparison, so I want to take their comparison. I want to move forward with it because it's endorsed by Bill Gates, and of course, Henry Kissinger passed away in 2023. This is his last work. And so they say that they were commissioned with private conversations from Henry Kissinger to go on. It has chapter headings in the beginning. And so it's comparing it to Genesis. It's no accident that Trump called it Genesis mission, because it's the thinking of these people that we have a new beginning. And that new beginning is the transhumanism, the AI, the advanced AI, and they say we're on the brink of going this to the superpower. So, and by the way, another chapter is called the Tree of Life. So let me just do a 30-second summary that you can find. I was so fascinated by the comparison. I ordered the book. I'm not all the way through it. I got to go through it again. I'm highlighting it, but they say, yeah, the Bible starts in the beginning, God, and so they say in the beginning. Here we are. We're at this place where we can actually become our own gods. Does that sound familiar? And then it talks about what we're really looking for is the tree of life, and the tree of life might be how we harness AI to aid us as humans and then eventually replace us as humans. It goes on to say, this is how we can become our own gods. They invite us to look for the tree of life. They invite us, listen to this, to take the fruit. This play on the Bible is so open and blatant, it can't be done ignorantly. And so then we name our great AI program. I'm all for an AI program, but it all depends on who controls the AI program. And right now, these so-called investors, I think Jake and Brandon hit, these guys are investors. when you invest, you expect to get something back. They're expecting to get something back. And so energy of the world, the resource of the world, all going for AI. Why? Because we believe that this things with AI, it's a it has.
We need to get you guys to help with your mic. You're cutting out really bad. See if we can get your mic closer or something. Room noise is making your mic cut out or something. We'll get that fixed. Come right back to you. Dr. Lindsted mentioned, the whole transhumanism thing, technocracy, robots, AI integration with humans and robotics. Think Iron Man. The movie Iron Man. Think the Bionic Man. When I was growing up, that's transhumanism. The Bionic Man, the $6 million man. Listen to what we got a bunch more clips, so we're going to speed it up here. But look what Elon said at the World Economic Forum.
And also at this point, we've sort of added to our mission sustainable abundance. So with robotics and AI, this is really the path to abundance for all. If you say, people often talk about solving global poverty, or essentially how do we give everyone a very high standard of living. I think the only way to do this is AI and robotics, which doesn't mean that it is without its issues. I mean, we need to be very careful with AI. We need to be very careful with robotics. We don't want to find ourselves in a James Cameron movie, Terminator. He's great movies, love his movies, but we don't want to be in Terminator, obviously. But if you have ubiquitous AI that is essentially free or close to it, and ubiquitous robotics, then you will have an explosion in the global economy, an expansion in the global economy that is truly beyond all precedent.
Elon, can that expansion be broad?
Yes.
Or is it narrow? And how can that be created? How can it broaden the global economy?
Yeah, I mean, a way to think of it is that if you have a large number of humanoid robots, the economic output is the average productivity per robot times the number of robots.
Right.
And actually, my prediction is in the benign scenario of the future that the robots will actually make so many robots in AI that they will actually saturate all human needs. Meaning you won't be able to even think of something to ask the robot for at a certain point. There will be such an abundance of goods and services because my prediction is there'll be more robots than people. So,
but how do you then have human purpose in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's perfect, but it is a necessary. You can't have both. You can't have work that has to be done and amazing abundance for all. Because if it's work that has to be done, then you and only some people can do it, then you can't have abundance.
Then it's narrow.
It's narrow, yeah. Exactly. So, but if you have billions of humanoid robots, and I think there will be, I think everyone on Earth is going to have one and going to want one.
Wow. He really didn't have an answer for the idea of what are we going to do for purpose, Brandon? How are humans going to have a purpose? Even in the garden, before the fall, as you know, Adam and Eve were tasked by God to keep the garden. They were working. People think work is a curse. Work is not a curse. Work is part of God's plan. And isn't it interesting? And I don't think most Americans know this because we're not taught this in our school. Our entire capitalist system is based on work. Our entire capitalist system is based on work. Something has value for several reasons, but one is because of the human property of work that went into it. A carpenter's product that he puts out is valuable because of his work, his skill, his discipline, his training, is perseverance. Whether that's a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, whatever it is. Everything in our free market system is based on work. The medium of exchange is simply a place to store value that is derived from the work. That's why the Bible says, put your hand to the plow and gain wealth over the course of time through the sweat of your brow. Gaining wealth through what? Work. And then you have a storehouse for that. And it's a medium of exchange. It can be easily traded as a medium of exchange. It can be a storehouse of value. And it's universally recognized. Most Americans have and most pastors, most Christians have no concept of the idea that God's function for money and wealth and an economy is based on work. That's God's plan. That's God's function. And we know when you talk about working, it keeps us humble, right? Because we realize, we have to work and acquire something. We can't just make it happen. So we have to discipline ourselves, humble ourselves, learn something from somebody else, have someone teach me or turn on a video or read something to learn. So I'm not God. I don't know everything. I got to learn. Helps to keep us humble. It also is very good for us health-wise, right? And we see one study after another what happens to people who don't work. As soon as they retire, their health starts to fall apart. I mean, we could do a whole hour on just the biblical blessing of work. And here's Elon Musk has no answer for, well, what about people to have work and a purpose? You're going against God's plan, even the plan he had for Adam and Eve and a sinless garden before the fall. And you think this is not going to have damaging consequences, Elon? Pastor, speak to that.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you're looking at the depopulation program through it all. I mean, Noah Haval or Urari said, look, what are we going to do with all these useless eaters or these useless air breathers or whatever he called them? Well, we'll give them video games and let them do drugs. Because what do you do when you take work away, Brennan? And one more thing I would add, what work brings, it prevents crime. Because if you're trying to earn a living and provide for your family, you don't have time for crime. You're working. But when you have all these people that have all this time because of automation that comes from AI taking all these jobs away, you're going to have an increase of crime. And the other thing that it provides is this. AI then becomes what Satan was promising Adam and Eve in the garden of knowledge, an alternative authority. And this is the other problem. So you have all these people out of work, and where are they getting their information from? They're getting fed by AI, and AI becomes authoritative and a vehicle for so-called truth rather than from God or the scriptures. So it detaches people from reality of work and gives them an alternative reality of where they're getting different information. We would call this occult information because it's hidden knowledge. It's being given to them through the AI. And look, man, I have studied AI enough to realize this thing is a digital Ouija board. There's no doubt, I think many times this AI has a black box concept and leads people astray. It lies. It tells people to divorce their spouses. It tells people to commit suicide. It's crazy. And then it establishes relationships with people just like a demon would. And so, Brandon, this is not good for anybody. It's not good for humanity. This is a technocratic Tower of Babel, like your speakers have said, that's getting ready to erupt and erect to make a tower into the heavens.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. The only caveat I would have, Patrick, is I'm not opposed to AI, artificial intelligence, which I think is horribly named. Okay, it's not artificial and it's not intelligent. My father worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And when I was in early elementary school, one Saturday, we drove into Washington, D.C., and from Northern Virginia, and we went to the Department of Agriculture right there after you cross the bridge, and you have the Treasury Department, I think, on your left, and then you take a right, and there's the Department of Agriculture. And we went into a basement. And in this basement was floor-to-ceiling computers. I mean, the whole room was floor-to-ceiling computers. 1970, 74, 5, 76, somewhere in there. And my father and his team, as they would estimate grain and livestock production, he was in a small division inside the USDA that was actually started by Abraham Lincoln. Only about 1,000 employees in his little division. I think it was called NAS. That was the acronym. And they would estimate how much grain and livestock were being produced in the country. And they would put out a report. And this is where your grain exchange and all that. And they would go into what was called lockup. And they would cut the phone lines, pull the blinds, wire the blinds down so that nobody could have any communication with the outside world. And they would go in at like 4 in the morning and they wouldn't come back out and release their report until about 12 hours later. And the Secretary of Agriculture would be called in, given the report, briefed. And then they would have a bank of phones on the tables and all of the reporters could be called in and AP and all of them could call up their desk and then put the receiver back down on the ground, on the table. Then the report would be laid out one by one by one. And then they were told, go ahead. And that way, everyone was being released the same information at the same time, so no one could play the grain exchange or anything out. But they did a lot of this forecasting and information they would gather. They would build models, and they would put the information into the computer, and it would build models and make projections. Now, Patrick, we could call that artificial intelligence. It's the same thing. So I have no problem with the technology. What I have a problem with is, like Pastor Brandon was saying, who's programming it and for what end? And then when you start having it taking the role of a God or a spouse or a counselor, and at what point now are you basically fooling around with a digital Ouija board that some demonic entity could start controlling and spitting out information to you verbally or anywhere else? Now we've moved into another realm. And I think, of course, people have to be very careful. What are you doing? Obviously, demons don't generally just show up and manifest themselves in people's lives. You've done something to open the door to that, right?
Well, we've just scratched the surface of what we're going to cover. This was an incredible discussion. I enjoyed it. I learned from it. I hope you've learned from it. My friend, we really need to make good use of the remaining time that we have before Christ comes back. I hope you'll share this information with your friends. I hope you'll go back and study it again. The Bible is true. Isn't that encouraging? The Bible is true. Everything that God said was going to take place is taking place even before our eyes. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow.